there everyone, it's Jedimanda here to bring you another cosplay tutorial. This time, let's put together Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now this cosplay isn't too hard to put together. The hardest part is honestly just keeping up with all the different pieces. Let's start by going over what you'll need. I'm using a store-bought McCall's pattern and various cottons and linens that I have listed here, plus some black yarn that I ended up picking up. So off to Joann's. Now, while I was at Joann's, I searched through the remnants and the discount fabrics to find all the fabrics that I needed. Her dress is made up of several different textures and designs, so you can get pretty creative with it here. And honestly, I really enjoy looking through all of the discounts and remnant fabrics because I feel like it's an added challenge than what is actually on the shelf, so you can just kind of really mix and match and have fun with textures here. Next, I grabbed some dyes for certain fabrics that I had base fabric for that I know I couldn't find the right color for easily, so I figured dyeing it would be a good shot to do that. And now don't forget your pattern, and I think we are ready to check out. In total, all the materials cost me $38. Not too bad, and also don't forget your dinner too. I picked up some Jimmy John's on the way home. Okay, on to the mock-up. I had some extra bed sheets that I was going to use as the fabric to make the first draft of the dress. Making this mock-up will allow me to tailor the dress to my size and to draw out the different fabric sections for the different colors of Sally's dress. So this step is 100% crucial. Even though if you're not a mock-up person, you have to do this for Sally's dress because you need to determine where all the different pattern pieces, all the different pieces of the fabric will go on her dress. For this step, just make the dress following the store-bought patterns. I did alter the neckline a bit. Once you have the dress made, pin the side seam closed with safety pins and grab a Sharpie. Using your best judgment, draw out your sections. Make sure you label each section with the appropriate front or back and color of what fabric what section will eventually be. Now let's cut up the dress. But before you cut it up, make connecting pattern marks that will ensure your pieces will line up and match back up. So make sure you are remembering where all your pieces are. It's helpful to also take a picture of your mock-up right here and how the pieces are laying together. And then don't forget to make notch marks right here, like I said, that how everything is going to pair up, because I got confused several times and you might as well. So just do yourself a favor, don't forget those notch marks. Also, don't forget to take a picture of front and back of the dress just for reference. Next, cut your shapes out and transfer them onto some paper. Don't forget to transfer your pattern marks and add seam allowances as well. Now, I used a 1/2 inch seam allowance. whichever is up for you. But don't forget, when you are cutting this out, you will need to add seam allowance back into each one of those pattern pieces to make sure everything fits together when you put it back together. For your pattern paper, I'm using newsprint. I suggest pretty much any kind of pattern paper out there, but I do suggest paper. It holds together a little bit better. And I am once again using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then this is what you're seeing the sleeve, and it's actually kind of already cut that hem how I wanted it, so it's going to be a little jagged because, you know, Sally's a ragdoll. So don't forget to add back in your seam allowances when you have everything cut up. I can't stress this enough. Once all your paper pattern pieces are cut, now let's move on to the fabric. Match up which fabric goes with which piece and start cutting. Try not to get confused here. This step confused me a lot, especially because I knew I was going to end up dyeing certain pieces. So make sure you have everything written out and labeled really well. Okay, now it's time to dye your fabric. Make sure everything is nice and labeled and you have all of your dyes and everything that you're going to use. A couple tips for dyeing: definitely have a clean area, unlike mine right here. You'll need a colored bath towel, a sink with cold running water, and a hot water in a pot that will remain your dye pot. And don't forget a slotted spoon so the dye can go through it. Now, this is the method that I use. There are a lot of different methods to dyeing, but I've always done it with a hot pot method. Now, cut up some pieces to test out your dye recipes. I go by tablespoons when I'm dyeing things, so when I am, especially since everything is small, I am going by 1 tablespoon, add in, test the dye, write down the amount of time that's in the dye, and then the amount of time the fabric is in the dye, and then pull it out. Make recipes for everything, pretty much. Start with 1 tablespoon, then add more dye if you need it to be more true. Rinse your fabric in cold water first, then dunk it into the dye. That readies your fabric for it. Wow, see how quick that dye took to that green linen? That was pretty impressive, and that was only in there for a very short amount of time. So make sure once you dye it, you rinse it with cold water for that dye to set. And also, a word of caution: when you are dyeing things with a hot pot method, please wear a mask with it, because the fumes of the dye can affect your nasal cavity, and it's weird when you pull out blue and red and purple boogers the next day, as odd as that may sound. My pieces are dyed now. Give them a good run through the washer and iron them flat to prepare for finishing the edges with a serger. Now the serger part isn't super needed, but it really does help keeping everything from raveling too much, especially where you don't really want it to ravel. Now it's my favorite part, adding all the details to the pieces. Here I'm using some black paint and that I'm going to be adding by hand painting stripes onto this part of her sleeve. Have fun with these parts and let the paint be a little more organic. So, I mean, you can do it however you want, to be honest, but I wanted it to look like it was kind of globbed on there. Therefore, the lines are a little bit messy. They're not 100% perfect, so it really looks like, you know, she created her dress. I do suggest using some paints that have a fabric medium in them or leather paints to paint on top of fabric, just so the paint doesn't flake off or come off in any way. You just never know sometimes with acrylics. Plus, a paint additive into the paint will help the paint not soak in so much to the fabric, so you only really have to do one pass through it. Right here, I'm going ahead and making the funky edge of the sleeve before I added the sleeve onto the dress. It's just an easier way to do this. I'm using a rotary cutter and just organically cutting a weird hem. But also, don't forget to try out different types of sponges and brushes to get different textures on the details of your fabric. Here, I'm using a little tiny little circle sponge brush. Once the painting parts are done, I moved on to the, quote, top stitching pieces. This one is pretty obvious. I took strips of brown fabric and top stitched them onto the pink piece. Now, I made that little white patch as she has by cutting out white piece of fabric and then running a tight zigzag stitch over it multiple times to give it that textured little look that she has that white patch on. Next, I made the large black dots she has out of black felt. I used my coffee cup as a template, thought it was a pretty good size, and just top stitched them on to the piece that needed that exact black dot. Okay, now all the pieces have been detailed with paint and or top stitched, so it's time to put her back together. Remember all those pattern marks you made? They're gonna come in handy right about now. Use them to put your entire dress back together. Take your time here. I suggest starting at the top of the dress and then working your way down. I kind of started from the sleeves and worked my way in, just because everything became overwhelming at one point. So I suggest starting at the top of the dress and working your way down. Just be patient. Just be patient. Okay, now that your dress is completely together, add a zipper in the side seam. That's the easiest way that I did for this closure of this one. You can do any kind of different closures, but a nice little enclosed zipper in a side seam is one of my favorite tricks. Now, try it on and make any changes you need to the fit. I did adjust the neckline a lot here. I just made it a little more dramatic and lower. Now take your black yarn and start sewing over the seams. Using a very large needle, enough for the black yarn to go through the eye. Using a large needle, do not pull the yarn too tight when you are stitching the X's and crosses over the seams where they need to go, because you don't really want, this is aesthetics, you know, you're not pulling that yarn really tight, you're not making any more seams, don't want to make it any tighter than it is. So my trick is do not pull it tight. So this was actually kind of fun. I went pretty haphazard with it, just kind of making X's and then crossing over and then just poking it in where I need. Just make sure that your needle is big enough to have your yarn through, and just be patient with this and don't pull your stitches too tight. Once you're done with the stitches, steam the yarn stitches down by just pressing with some steam with your iron and making sure everything is nice and flat. Okay, so now we're going to make the skin of Sally. This part is totally optional. You do not have to do that. You can just body paint yourself. However, I don't like to do that because I like wearing these to conventions, so making these body socks that cover my arms and hands is just really, really, really handy. It's a great option for conventions. Start by obtaining some blue tights. I purchased mine from welovecolors.com. To make it easier on yourself, you'll want to make a cardboard copy of your hand to make the sewing hand part easier. Cut a 1 to 2 inch slit in the crotch area, not too big. This is actually for your head to go through. I know it sounds a bit weird, but you'll want to make that slit first. Try on the body sleeve and put your arms through, all the way through the leg holes to see where your fingertips are going to stop. Draw a line where they stop at the end, and that will be the excess you will cut off once you stitch a seam there as shown. Use fray check to finish the edges of the neck hole so it does not fray anymore. Now stitch across the chalk marks that you made at the end of the armholes. Now slide the cardboard hand all the way up into the armholes to your spot where you're ending. We are now going to hand baste in the finger areas. Use a contrasting thread and do a large basting stitch all the way around your cardboard hand as shown here. It's really helpful, and I know this step seems kind of monotonous, but it's very helpful. Now, choose a tight and small zigzag stitch on your machine, remove your cardboard and your cardboard hand copy, and stitch over the basting stitches that you have sewn. Once that is done, cut away all the excess, leaving a super tiny seam allowance. I'm showing you here the excess around the wrist, that if you have this, just flip the body sock inside out and stitch a small dart in the wrist area to make it smaller and tighter fitting to your arm, because you do want this body sock tight thing to be pretty close to your skin. Now, put the body sock and leg tights on someone, my poor boyfriend here, and grab a Sharpie and add the stitching lines by drawing them on. I went also pretty haphazard with this. You can stitch these on if you want, but I wouldn't suggest it. I would use a Sharpie. Okay guys, we're on the last thing. We are making her leg warmers. Super easy. Take some black and white striped fabric that I found, make a rectangle and stitch up the sides. Now you have little leg warmers. I did end up taking them in a little bit tighter to make them stay up on my leg because they did keep falling down. So maybe adding a little bit of elastic in wouldn't be too bad of an idea. We are now finished. Sally is complete. The wig that I'm wearing is from Arta Wigs. It's literally the longest wig they have possible, and in the color Scarlet. If you have any questions about my Sally, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for joining in on this very quick and easy Halloween costume, or all year round Sally outfit. Who knows? Sally's just super fun to make. Thank you for watching, guys. I really do appreciate you all watching my channel and subbing to my channel. But also, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you like cosplay content, especially Halloween cosplay content. And I will see you all next week. Bye, y'all!